Good morning and welcome to HR in Half an Hour. I'm Susan Apple, Senior Talent Acquisition Business Partner at Morse & Garetano Insurance. Today, I want to present some best practices for conducting interviews and assessing candidates. First, I'd really like to take a quick poll. I'm curious about some of your reasons for coming here and if we can share some of our pain points. I'd like to ask you, what is the biggest pain point you're having with hiring and recruiting? Some of the top things that can go wrong for you are, for example, in the interview, the candidate seems great, but then as an employee, they turn out to be very unreliable. Or number two, it seems like they already had significant skills based on their resume and what they said in the interview, but now on the job, this new employee seems to need extensive training on the basics. Number three, we feel desperate to hire and definitely settled for a candidate we're not excited about. And number four, all of the above. So let's just take a minute to see where we're at. I have certainly experienced all of these things, and I can't wait to see the results. Sophia is going to do a little tabulating for us. It looks like in the interview, the candidate seemed great, but then as an employee, they turn out to be very unreliable and then equally popular as all of the above. Well, I hope you'll take some heart in knowing you are not alone. And I am pleased to share that this is exactly what this is about today. So with that, let's go to our agenda. Here, what we're going to do today is look at the ingredients for an effective interview. I've got 3 tools for you: job competencies, behavioral interviewing, and rating the candidate's competencies. Then we'll have a few quick do and don'ts, and I'll have time for your questions. So let's dig in to how we solve for these issues. I think the first place to start is, what are the ingredients for an effective interview? An effective interview is helping you solve for those issues we talked about in the poll. So it's using the interview process to uncover as much as possible about the candidate. We want to look at their past work product, right? We want to see what their projects and ongoing tasks and responsibilities were. And we can see a lot of that in the resume, but we also want to know, what were the challenges they faced? What are the achievements they're particularly proud of, right? So we want to ask about those work products. Then number 2, hard and soft skills. Sometimes we fail to really ask about the hard skills. So there might be certifications, there might be specialized training, but we're not really asking about how they use those skills, which is what we want to do in the interview. And then soft skills is a whole area that might be very important to the job. Can they work on a team? Can they be accountable when working independently? Are they adaptable? Are they effective with emotional intelligence? Can they read cues? Can they adjust depending on the audience? So all of those factors make a difference in how they're going to behave in the workplace. Then number 3, work ethic and values. This is not something that you're going to ask about in a very direct way, because somebody can pitch what they believe in or what their values are. It's actually, you're listening for how those come out when they're answering questions in the interview portion. So work ethic and values, I think, is where we run into the areas where it's like, wow, they're not behaving anything like they said they behave in the interview. So we'll dig into that a little bit. And then finally, career goals. I think career goals are important because sometimes your job really doesn't have a growth trajectory. And if someone who, like, let's say it's a cashier in a retail business, and there's really no, it's a transactional job. You want someone who enjoys being able to serve the customers and clock in and out and walk away at the end of the day. If you have somebody who is really interested in this being a stepping stone to a bigger managerial career and you don't have that kind of career path, you need to know that because you might only have them for 2 months, right? And you need somebody who's really going to be happy in that people facing kind of stable role. So, all four of those components are really what are going to help you do the best assessment you can. And important about these components is that you could read about these facts on a resume or hear a candidate say them in a maybe a practiced pitch, which there's nothing wrong with them practicing and getting themselves prepared. But it's another thing to actually listen to a potential employee speak about these topics while they're citing specific examples. And that's the goal of our interview, to hear specific examples that reveal all these components. And the key word there is reveal. So with that, we're going to look at our first tool, and that's job competencies. This is what you're going to use to hone in on how to discern job fit with any given candidate. The key factors that lead to success in a specific role are the actual job competencies for that role. A competency is really made up of a combination of things. So you can see in this graphic, it's not just the skill, it's their behavior with the skill, it's their knowledge around the skill that they're using. And it's that combination that really makes for a complete job competency. So a concrete example, I can make this a little less abstract, is let's say you own a restaurant and you need to hire a new server. The actual job description lays out the server's responsibilities, and you might put in your job ad that the overall mission is to give the customer an attentive, timely, and excellent dining experience. Great. You have a clear mission for the role, clear description. But now, when we're hiring for this role, we need to define what are the main competencies that allow a customer to get that wonderful dining experience. So for this role, I might break down what are those competencies. And I look at the first one I'll say would be high quality customer service. I want them to have this competency of being able to deliver really high quality customer service. Then I also might decide I need them to have the competency of effective time management. We're really busy, we're juggling a lot of tables. They need to be able to handle that kind of workload. And then I also need them to be adaptable. It's a really fast-paced environment. I need to find out if that candidate can adapt to interruptions, distractions, and not lose the polish of their customer service competency. So now I have 3 competencies that I'm going to focus on for my interviewing. I recommend you lay out 3 to 5, right? Every job really involves more than 5 competencies, but it would be unrealistic to really cover more than that concretely in an interview. So you want to give yourself something manageable, and you will discover that you're hearing and learning about other competencies within that interview, even though you're focused on these 3. So part of how you're preparing is really focusing on your priorities for this role. We have 3 for our server position. Now we're going to take one more step and we're going to define these competencies, because what do they mean in your restaurant? Every business is a little different. So let's go to high quality customer service. What does that mean? Say you have a high price point, very fine dining establishment. You probably want a very polite, respectful, formal, hushed communication style in the environment so that everything maintains this nice, serene, elegant atmosphere. You also want customer service that is attentive to subtle physical cues, like a quick glance at a waiter or just the setting down of an empty wine glass. And you want someone who could maybe exercise great patience with a very demanding client, and also someone that could handle disruptions and interruptions with discretion and polish. Okay, great. That's your definition of high quality customer service in your establishment. Now, what if you own a very fun, family friendly diner? Oh my goodness, you do not want formal, hushed communication. You need somebody who's warm and outgoing and welcoming, casual in their communication style, so that the customer comes in and they feel like they're going into their neighbor's kitchen, right? You also want someone who might be very attentive to overt physical cues, doesn't get thrown by being waved over. You want somebody who could jump in and proactively problem solve, handle disruptions, and maybe bring sense of humor or a great sense of banter to any kind of customer interaction. These are two very different versions of high quality customer service. And if you define them first, before you meet your first candidate, then you know what you're going to be asking about and what you're going to be listening for. So don't skip that step of defining those competencies for you and your business and what that means in that role. Okay, so once we've defined that, we're ready for tool number 2, which is behavioral interviewing. And I'd like to read this sentence to you. Past behavior is the best predictor of future performance. In behavioral interviewing, we want to uncover actual examples of how the candidate performed in their past work. We're not looking for a summary of the past work. You can see that on the resume. We're not looking for their opinion on their competencies. Like, oh, I always deliver high quality customer service. I get great tips at the end, always, right? That's their opinion, but I haven't learned anything about how they earned that. We're looking to see how they actually behaved in the past circumstances. So with that, let's go to why we use what's called behavioral questions. The science of behavioral questions is really that we want to be able to achieve all 3 of these components on this slide. We want to hear how a candidate responded to a past event. We want the behavioral questions to be very particularly focused on the competencies that we've chosen that are key and a priority for the job. And we also want the behavioral question to lead the candidate to really help you see them in action, help you step back in and watch how they handled a situation. So that's how these questions are designed. Okay. We ask questions that allow the candidate to take you into the scenario and walk you through what happened and then walk you through how they responded. We're asking, well, what happened? What did you do next? How did the customer react to that? How did you resolve that issue? These behavioral questions are inviting the candidate to share their story. So there's another tool that's going to help you once you're in the behavioral questioning. We'll take a basic question as an example, and we'll go back to our server sample job, and I'll say, my basic behavioral question is, can you tell me about the last time you had to resolve an issue with an upset customer? Okay, that's a great question because 1, it's simple, it's straightforward, it's not hard for the candidate to understand. 2, it's asking for a specific example. I'm not asking them to summarize, how do you handle upset customers? That would be inviting a generalized answer with an opinion. By asking, can you tell me about the last time you had to resolve an issue with an upset customer? I'm asking them to tell me the circumstances. And here's where we have the components of this slide. You're listening for these STAR components. S is situation or context. You need to understand, was it during a busy dinner service or was it between breakfast and lunch? Nobody else was in the restaurant. Those create very different atmospheres. Right? Task. What were your responsibilities? Right? Are you someone who has to not only take the orders, but clear the tables, mix the drinks, lead new customers that are coming in to tables? Are you juggling all of that? Right? I need to know how many tasks you're assigned in the situation. I'm listening for unmuted. Sorry, I muted by mistake. I'm listening for actions you took once the customer was upset. What were the actual steps you took? And then I'm listening for the results of those actions. What happened as a result? Did you get that big fat tip? And finally, I always add an extra R. I want to hear their reflection. So for me, that means, so what was your takeaway about that experience? Or I might ask, what's the biggest learning moment about that experience? Or has that change helped you change anything moving forward? Any kind of reflection that comes to you organically, so that you're always listening. After you ask the behavioral question, you're always listening for these components to come out. Okay, so now let's dive in to what happens when all these components don't come out in their answer. I'll tell you, most candidates are very uncomfortable going back into the story. They don't think you want to hear the boring details. They think you just want to hear the results. Oh, I always am able to turn them around. I always wind up getting a big tip. You do want to hear the boring details because you need to see how they handle that, right? You need to understand how they actually behave with those competencies. And the only way you're going to see that is to have them tell you step by step what they did. So you're going to help them by probing, by asking more questions when they keep things general or vague. And for me, I think the key to effective probing is to literally lean in with kindness and curiosity and keep asking. Because if you're kind and if you're curious, you're inviting someone to want to tell you more. So instead of leaning back with judgment and skepticism, we're literally going to lean in and smile and say, oh, tell me more about that. Wait, I didn't understand the situation. Was it a busy time of day? Right? You're just going to help them set the scene and then help them get to the parts you want to hear about. I have up here on the slide some prompts that could help you do that. But there are many little cues, probing sentences that you can say that will come to you organically. Let's see. Wait, I have to check my notes just to make sure I'm not missing anything. Oh, okay. Yeah, of course. I knew there was something important here. So I have a link to a guide that I think you're going to find very useful. It's called the 75 Behavioral Questions and to select for the best candidate interview. And it's free, it's in the public domain. I've been using this tool for about 3 years as a resource to help hiring managers because it lists 75 questions that are behavioral, that are can be matched to different competencies, and you can tweak and customize depending on your role. So that'll be a great resource for you to help you really frame the best question. Great templates. And in general, I would say the last thing I want to say about behavioral interviewing is that short answers are your best friend. Okay. Do you have an example of a time when you made a big mistake on the job? And I just close my mouth. I lean in. Oh, tell me about that. Because that allows them to think and find an example. And if you're curious, they know that you want to hear about it. Okay, just give them time to tell your story. Now we get to move on to tool number 3, rating the candidate competencies. Once you complete your interview, there's a really crucial tool to use, and it's scoring or rating the candidate based on their competencies. Often, hiring panels resist this step. They think they'll just know who is the best fit. I think it's just human nature in us. I think we resist it because we all want to go by our gut. We all want to go by the feeling we get about a candidate. I liked this person. I think they'd be a great addition. Oh, I love their energy, their personality. But that isn't really telling you anything about their competency level or anything about their work ethic or anything about how they really go about their work. So we want to be a little more objective, and then we can actually make an informed decision. And that's where you're going to reduce your risk. So, with that, let's look at how to use this tool. You'll see here that I just created a very basic scorecard for our sample today. You can create this. This is a table out of Microsoft Word. You can create this. You can get templates online. You can get fancy. You can make a form, a graph, etc. But I want you to look at the components that you need in order to rate someone's competencies. You'll see across the top that I have here categories. Do they meet the hiring standard? And I give that a numeric value. Are they partially meeting the hiring standard? That gets a slightly less numeric value. Or do they not meet that hiring standard at all? That gets an even lower numeric value. I also have along that left column the actual competencies I'm interviewing for. And then I have a place to take notes. So you'll see here, candidate A had amazing high quality customer service skills. I was blown away by their examples. I wouldn't have to train them at all. Fantastic, really bring a great set of skills and competencies there. They showed gaps in their stories in their ability to manage time effectively when things get piled up and busy. And I could hear those gaps in a few of their stories. So I want to keep that in mind. I don't want to be so in love with their high quality customer service that I forget that they would need some training on that. And then their adaptability. That was revealed to me in the stories that they have trouble pivoting quickly, and they would definitely need coaching on that. So I have a lot of information here. Okay, their numeric score is a 7, right? That doesn't really mean anything to me yet, but what I can see just from my little chart is here's some areas where bringing them on, I would need to coach them. Now let's go to the second candidate, candidate B. Oh, they have a higher score, but they have a very different set of strengths. Their customer service is a 2. I heard gaps. They have not had deep experience with the kind of level of quality customer service I want delivered. So that's going to need coaching. However, their time management and their adaptability, they showed example after example that really clearly laid out that they can handle any kind of emergency. They can turn on a dime and keep going. So now I have to look. This candidate got an 8. The previous candidate got a 7. Well, I could say, well, they got a higher, candidate B got an 8, so I'm going to pick them. But that's not everything that I'm basing this on. What's going on in my workplace? Do I need someone to set a really high quality example of customer service because I'm missing that on the team and I can't seem to train that very well? So is candidate A a better fit because I know how to train somebody on their time management skills? I know how to coach to be adaptable, and I have other team members who can adapt and role model that. Or is candidate B better because I've had really good experience coaching on high quality customer service, but I've had bad experience coaching time management. I don't do that well. So if they don't come in with that skill, we're going to be in a tough place. You're evaluating everything. You're evaluating what the manager can handle. You're evaluating what the team needs. Where are the gaps? And you're also evaluating What's the highest priority for you walking in day one? So the scorecard gives you a great picture as to what you need to evaluate to make your decision. All right, that's our third tool. Now I'm just going to end with a couple do's and don'ts. So definitely review your candidate materials ahead of time. Don't have your face on the other screen looking over because you're missing all their cues. You're missing the opportunity to really talk to them and already have looked at that stuff. Number two, prepare your questions ahead of time. I think you're getting the picture that obviously these questions take a little thought and you want to match them to your competencies. And then give your candidate multiple opportunities to share what they've done. So you want to ask at least 2 questions per competency and probe deeply. So you get at least 2 stories around each competency. And then take the time to give the candidate a clear understanding of the role and what's expected of them. That you owe that to them. That will help them understand if this is a good fit for them. And you want to invite questions from the candidate because their questions will also reveal some things about them. They might reveal about work ethic. They might reveal about some other things that don't have to do with competencies. And then finally, break down those long questions into manageable bites. You'll see in the template I gave you that you'll see some really questions with like 3 added questions. You want to not use those until you get to the place in the story where you need more information. Well, wait, so what happened next, right? So you don't want to just give it all to them at once because that can be overwhelming as a candidate. What happened? How did you resolve it? What did you do with your stakeholders? And then what's your reflection now? That's just too much to give somebody in one question. Okay, then don'ts. The don'ts are really about compliance. These are questions that you're legally not allowed to ask a candidate, and they can lead to all kinds of biases. They're pretty obvious, but don't ask questions around religion and specific observances. Don't ask questions about their age unless you're determining if they are of legal age to work. Okay, so that, or legal age to serve liquor or something like that. Don't ask about their birthplace or their citizenship. You can ask if they are eligible to work legally in the United States, but you're not going to ask them if they're a citizen or not. You're not going to ask them about their national origin. Even if you're excited and that's a fun talking point or something, you're not going to ask about that. And you're not going to ask about their sexual orientation or their marital status. Don't ask about their family status if they have kids or how old their kids are or where their kids go to school, none of that. And don't ask about their mental or physical disabilities or conditions. If they offer something up, you certainly can ask, oh, what kind of accommodations have helped you navigate that condition in the workplace? That's appropriate, but only if they bring it up. Okay, that was quick. I've got some time for questions. I can also stay a couple minutes over. So, Sophia, do you want to field me some questions?
Yes, I think you explained yourself so well that we only have one question.
Okay.
Um, so some are actually coming in. So would you have a recommendation on how to reply to candidates who say, I've never been in that position?
Yes, that's a great question. Sometimes, if they reply, I've never been in that position, meaning, you mean like, I'm guessing you mean like if I say one time you made an error at work. Let's use that as an example. They say, I've never been in that position. Like, well, sometimes I'm always like, wow, really? That's impressive. Um, uh, I don't know. I would move on to the next question in the competency, and then I might circle back to it. Now that you've had a time to relax, I'm wondering, could you give me an example now? Is there still nothing coming to mind? I think it's a little concerning if it's something that is unlikely that they've never been in that position. That's a little concerning, and I would take note of that. But sometimes somebody just hasn't. Okay, let's move on to the next question.
Okay, so regarding asking about their citizenship, after you
Yes,
have asked if they are legally allowed to work in the US, can you
yes,
ask them if they hold a current visa or what their visa status is?
that's a great question. I just had this. I've had this in the past few days. So in the interview, um, in our application, we ask, can you show proof of your eligibility to work? And they have to answer yes or no. So I don't know what that proof is. So in a first round interview, I might not ask beyond, are you eligible to work in the United States? And can you show proof of that when that might be asked for? As far as visas, oh, this is so tricky. I have asked, um, let me back up. Very often they will offer what it is they have, why they're eligible. They might say, "Oh yes, I have my green card," or they might say, "Yes, I have an Opt-1 visa." Okay, so you're just going to take note of that. You're not going to dig into questions about that later. You're going to go back and look and see, can my organization, what are the rules around Opt-1 visas, and can my organization handle that? Once you get closer to deciding to hire, you can ask about the type of visa they have, and you can investigate and do your due diligence through your own HR department if you can hire that.
Okay, perfect. Next question. What's the best questions for hiring a minor that hasn't had a job yet?
Oh, that's great. When I often interview folks that maybe it's their first job, maybe um, just out of high school or just out of college. And so I ask for examples from school, examples from their life. So you can learn about how they handle, what was the hardest project or homework assignment you've had in the past semester? And then tell me about that. Why was it hard for you? I'd love to hear about what were the challenges. They're talking and then like, okay, and what did you learn from it? Right? That's ask them about school projects, ask them about extracurricular activities, and ask about those competencies in relationship to what they are involved in their life.
Perfect. Okay. Next question. So we know we can't ask about family, kids, age, etc. How do you recommend, handle, and account for considering the total cost of the employee, assuming you provide benefits for employee and family members since you don't have this information?
I can't. I'm not allowed to have that information. I'm not allowed to know that information until they're on board. So I can't make that part of my consideration. As far as how, as a business, you plan for that, I think you just have to factor in what if they have 4 dependents, and like what the worst case scenario in terms of cost. I think you just have to factor that in because you can't know that, and I wouldn't spend time predicting that. Those are not things uh, we can plan for, frankly.
Okay, perfect. And that's all that we have for questions today.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you for staying over. I enjoyed this. Please let me know how it goes. If you have questions, follow-up questions, I'm always available. And yeah, I want to hear if these tools work for you. So I wish you all the best. Have a great rest of your week.